So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. I hope everyone had the chance to download the training materials from the chat. If not, please drop a message to the Q&A section and I will upload the training materials again. My name is Edwin and I will be the host for today's session. I'm an audit transformation manager here at DataSnipper, and before that I was an auditor myself, so I created these inventory use cases that I'm going to present today. Before jumping into the use cases, let's talk briefly about what today's training agenda is about. First, I will talk about the inventory procedures in general and the challenges that comes with it. And after that, we will jump into the use cases. And again, you can find these materials in the chat section of Zoom. And in the end, we will have some time for Q&As. But if you have any questions during any part of that presentation, please post them in the Q&A section of Zoom, because I will take constant breaks to answer those. Now, before jumping into the actual training, I'd like to ask you to fill in the poll that I'm going to launch. You can answer it directly in Zoom. And my question is, how familiar are you with using DataSnipper? So I can see that most people have used it and curious to learn more. I'm very happy to hear that. I really hope that I can show you some nice tips and tricks today. Thank you very much for answering the poll. I will pause for a moment. So can you send me the training materials? Of course, I will copy and paste it in the chat section. It will take a few seconds to load, but once it is loaded, you should be able to see it in the chat section and download it directly from there. And while you are waiting for the training materials, let's talk about what are the most generic inventory procedures. So when it comes to inventory testing, it varies from client to client, as I'm sure that all of you are aware of, but there are some similarities between each client. For example, the stock count procedure. So we need to perform stock count for most clients, and documenting these procedures can be quite time-consuming, and also with several pages long document, it can also be very hard to review the documentation as well. So in today's session, we will see how you can document it using DataSnipper. Another generic test for inventory procedures are inventory valuation, because in the end, the question is that the number that you see in the balance sheet is actually correct, and it's according to the market value of the inventory items. And lastly, we have some client-specific inventory tests. As all manufacturing clients are different, it's important to develop client-specific tests as well. And the main challenges with inventory procedures is that the document quality can be quite bad sometimes. If you think about stock count, for example, you walk around with a piece of paper, write the numbers down in that paper, and then you extract that information into the Excel workbook. But these papers can be quite long, as you print out the whole subledger of the client. So it can be very hard to trace back that documentation into the extractions that you made in your Excel workbook. Also with inventory, it can be very hard to find unique reference points, because the item code may not be listed in the item that you are counting. So it's very hard to connect these dots between the subledger and during the stock count as well, or other inventory tests. And also the biggest challenge when it comes to inventory are client-specific tests. So it can be very hard to develop each kind of procedures. And also it can be very hard to standardize these procedures from client to client. And in today's session, we will cover 3 different tests. First, we will cover a stock count. So we will see how you can document a stock count procedure using DataSnipper. And it also makes the reviewer's life easier, because we will create cross-references between the stock count sheet and the Excel workbook. After that, we will cover some evaluation testing, which where we will trace back inventory items to expiration date. For that, we will use some pictures which were taken during a stock count, and we will extract the expiration date and use other automation features of DataSnipper in our test book. And lastly, I will show you how to do a price test procedure, as it tends to be standardized for all clients. So if you know how you can do a price test procedure using DataSnipper, you can save some time when it comes to inventory testing. So now, if you have downloaded the training materials, now is the time to open them. I will reshare my screen so you can see the test workbooks as well. And if you have extracted the training materials, you should be able to see 2 Excel files within that. And the first that we will start with is the stock count and expiration date. So let's open that Excel workbook. And after opening it, let's enable editing. And let's take a closer look at the workbook. I can see that someone raised their hands. Unfortunately, I can't unmute everyone in today's session. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. So once you enabled editing, you can see that the document viewer on the right-hand side popped up, which means that we already have documents imported into DataSnipper. Now, someone answered the poll that they never seen DataSnipper. So in case you are wondering how you can import documents into DataSnipper, you need to navigate to the DataSnipper ribbon, and you can import documents by clicking on the top left corner of the DataSnipper ribbon. And here in the pop-up window, you can select the documents that you want to import. But since we already have the documents imported, let's go back to the testing sheet. I will close the document viewer as well. And let's take a look at our testing objective. So I can see that someone couldn't download the training material. I will share it in the chat section again. It will take a few seconds to upload the training materials, but after that, you should be able to see in the chat section of Zoom. Okay, so going back to our stock count and expiration date example, our first test is to obtain reasonable assurance over the existence and completeness of inventory. So our first test will be a stock count procedure. Secondly, we need to obtain reasonable assurance over the inventory reserve calculation based on the expiration date by tracing back the expiration date to the subledger data. And our procedure steps are listed here. First, we need to obtain the subledger data from our client. You can find the subledger sheet in the Excel workbook as well. You can see that the PBC was received from the financial manager via email. And here you can see all the attributes that are listed in that subledger data. So we have an item code, item name, amount, unit, value per unit, total value, and an expiration date in the subledger. So we have all the data that we need for our test, for both of our test works. So first, we need to select samples for our stock count procedure. And here you can see that we have made a selection of 15 for stock count from the subledger. And for the expiration date, we also made a selection of 9. And once the selection is completed, we can start the actual work. So on the second sheet of the Excel workbook, you can see that it's an inventory count procedure. And here we selected items for floor to sheet, but also for sheet to floor. And we listed the item code, the item name, the amount, and the unit in our selection. So in case we are tracing back several input data to a document, then in that case, we can use document matching. But before jumping into document matching, let's take a look at what we are trying to do here. So let's take a look at the document viewer. And within the document viewer, if you use the drop-down menu, you will you will see a stock count PDF on the bottom. So once you go there, you can see that it's a stock count sheet. So we have the same data here. So the item code, item name, and the amount, but we also have a column for the counted amounts. So we need to trace back that counted amount to the amount that is listed in the subledger. And again, since we have several input data, in that case, we can utilize document matching. Now, in order to use document matching, we need to navigate to the DataSnipper ribbon, and we need to click on document matching. Once you click on document matching, a new window will appear on the right. And if you want to start a new document matching, you need to click on that blue button on the top right corner. Once you click on that, you can see that document matching is a 3-step procedure, and the first step is to select our sample data. So first, let's delete the data that is already there. And now we need to select our sample data, which will be the item code and the amount. And the reason that we are only selecting these 2 input columns is that we only have 2 output columns. So as you can see, we need the item code and the counted amount from the stock count PDF that we just saw before. So in that case, when it comes to the configuration of document matching, we only need to select these 2 columns. So again, we need the item code, and we also need the amount. Now we can select an additional column by holding down the Control button and by selecting the amount column. And once I release the left mouse button, you can see that these 2 columns are included. The reason that we can select all 4 columns is that we can only select those columns that will be included as an output as well, which in our case is only the item code and the amount. And again, by holding down the Control button, you can select an additional column in your test work. Now we also need to select the first row includes headers option, as we selected the header row as well. But now our first step is completed. So we can click on Next. Next, we need to select our documents. Now we have 2 types of documents imported into DataSnipper at the moment. So we have the expiration date pictures, and we have the stock count PDF. Now it is very important to note that DataSnipper is not able to tell the difference between the supporting document types. So in order to make that differentiation, we need to create that manually. So we need to use document folders. After clicking on the document folders, you can see that this box is empty, which means that we don't have folders created so far. So we need to click on the blue Add New Folder button. After clicking on that blue Add New Folder, you can see that a new pop-up window appeared, which is the document organizer. You can reach the same view by clicking on the Organize button next to the text snip. So the window will be the same if you click on that button as well. And now we can organize our documents. You can see that by clicking on the Add New Folder button, a new folder is automatically created. If you click on these 3 dots, you have the option to either remove or to rename the folder. So now I just want to rename it. And since we are performing the stock count procedure, I will name that folder stock count. Once the folder is created, now we can group documents there. So if we click back to the Show All Documents, we need to include that stock count PDF in the stock count folder. Now we can do that 2 ways. First, we need to select the stock count PDF, and we can either click on the Move button here on the top, and by clicking to the stock count folder, it will be moved to that folder, or we can just drag and drop that document to the corresponding folder, which is the stock count in our case. Once that drag and drop is completed, you can see that the folder name is filled out in the document organizer next to the stock count. And also if I click on the stock count folder, I can see the PDF document listed there. So now that we have created that folder for document matching, we can close the document organizer by clicking on the OK button here on the bottom right side of the screen. After clicking on that, now all we need to do is to select that stock count folder, and the second step of the configuration is completed. So we can click on Next. And now we arrive to the last step, which is to find the corresponding output columns for all the input columns. So we need the item code from the stock count PDF to column G. And as you can see, the configuration is correct. It is column G. In case we need another column, we can click on the drop-down menu and select any column that we want. But since the configuration is correct, we will leave it now as it is. We also need the counted amount from the stock count PDF, which is column H. And we try to match that counted amount to the amount from the subledger. So in that case, the configuration is correct again. So since we don't need to change anything, now we can click on the blue Match All Rows button, and DataSnipper will do the hard work and match the information to the stock count PDF. Once it is completed, we need to use our professional judgment to validate the results. And it is very important to do that after every document matching, because you can get false positive results. So let's validate the first item. You can see that the item code is identified correctly in the stock count sheet. But if I go to the right, the counted amount is matched to the amount column on the stock count sheet, which in our case is not correct, since we try to match the counted amount column to the amount from the subledger. So now we have two ways to correct that. As you can see, all the amounts are matched to the actual amount column instead of the counted amount. Now we have two ways to fix that issue. One is to go through each of these cells individually, and you can move the snip to the counted amount, so you can make it slightly bigger, and then you can drag and drop that snip to the counted amount column. And now you can see that the correct amount is extracted from the stock count PDF into the Excel workbook. But doing it one by one for each item can take a lot of time. So in that case, we need to exclude somehow the amount column from the stock count PDF. So DataSnipper won't be able to see these amounts. So it will only include the counted amount column. Now, if we want to delete information or hide information from DataSnipper, we can do that by clicking on the Remove button here on the DataSnipper ribbon, and we can redact the text. So by clicking on the redaction, what it does is that it hides information. It can also be used to hide confidential information in the supporting documents, but you can also use it to hide information from document matching. And since we don't need that amount column for document matching, we can use redaction to hide that information from DataSnipper. So document matching will match the correct amounts with our supporting document. Now, if we want to apply redaction, we need to select the whole column with that redaction. And once it is selected, we also need to right-click on that redaction, and we need to click on Apply All Reductions. Now, it is important to note that once you click on Apply All Reductions, you can't undo that. So if you if you redact a document wrong, then the only way to fix that is to import that document again without the redaction. But once the redaction is applied, you can delete it. So let's apply the redaction on the second page as well. So we need to hide that column from DataSnipper. And again, right-click and apply all reductions. So now that data is hidden from DataSnipper as well, let's see what changes when we run document matching again. If we want to run document matching again with the same configuration, we need to click on the document matching button, and we need to click on match all rows again. Since we already have data in the output columns, DataSnipper will ask us if we want to overwrite these rows, and our answer here is yes. And once document matching is run, now we can validate the results based on our professional judgment. So again, the item code is correct. And now if I go to the counted amount cell, you can see that it is correctly matched with the stock count PDF. So again, if you want to hide information from document matching, click on the remove button and click on the redact text option. So in that case, DataSnipper won't be able to match your input data to the column that you don't need from that document. So now we can click through the results and validate them based on our professional judgment. Now what you may also realize is that there are some cells which are left empty. And the reason for that is that DataSnipper was not able to find an exact match for that input data. So in that case, we need to go through these items manually and create manual snips in order to extract that information. So here you can see that the amount differs from our subledger data. So if we want to extract that information and highlight it as an exception, we have two ways to do that. We can create an exception snip over that amount. So first, let's select the red exception snip on the DataSnipper ribbon. And once it is created, you can see that a red X has been created in our Excel workbook. So the issue with exception and validation snip is that it won't extract data from the supporting documents. You still need to do that manually. You can override the cell content without breaking the cross-reference, but still it requires manual typing, and we want to avoid that. So if we want to avoid the manual typing of information, we can use the blue manual text snip. So first, let's delete that exception snip by clicking on the delete snips button, and let's create a text snip over that amount. Now you can see that amount is now extracted, but there is a difference between the subledger data and the stock count PDF, so we want to mark it as an exception. Now, since the extraction of that number is completed automatically with text snip, now we can change the snip type to an exception snip by right-clicking on the snip itself and by changing it to exception snip. Now you can see that a red highlight has been created and the cell content remained the same. So if you want to extract information from supporting documents, but you also want to mark it as an exception, I would suggest to first place a manual text snip, as we will do it with the second empty cell. So let's create a manual text snip. And after that, right-click on that and change it to an exception snip. Let's do the same for the next item and change it to an exception snip. And now the amount is extracted automatically with text snip, and we also change it to an exception snip so the reviewer can easily identify which rows are incorrect. Now let's take a look at the item codes here, as document matching was not able to pick that up. So here you can see that the item code here is visible, but let's see what is the reason that document matching didn't pick it up. So first, let's extract that data with DataSnipper, and now let's compare that to our subledger data. You can see that here the letter J is recognized as column I by DataSnipper, but we can clearly see in the PDF that it's a J. So in that case, we can just overwrite that I within our Excel workbook, and since it is not an exception. Let's do the same for the next item. Let's extract the information. And as you can see, the issue here is that the letter Q is recognized as O by DataSnipper, but it is not a problem because we can easily change that information within the cell. And lastly, let's extract the item code for Bee and Biscuit. And as you can see, the issue here is the same. Column J is recognized as I, so we need to change that letter manually. And now you can see that all the cells are filled out, and it only required a little bit of manual work. And now from a reviewer's perspective, they just need to click through these results, and they can instantly see those on the right-hand side on the document viewer. And also the exceptions are marked with red, so it is very easy to spot them and follow it up with your client or follow it up in your audit trail. So before progressing into the expiration date test, I will pause for a moment to see if there are any questions. I can see that the Q&A section is empty at the moment, but if you have any questions, please post them there. If not, then let's progress to the next test, which will be the expiration date test. So here we are testing the inventory reserve calculation, because I would expect that the items which are expired are that for the items that are expired, an inventory reserve is calculated and also accounted for. So here we check if the expiration date that is listed in the subledger is correctly matching the data on the item itself. Now, in order to do that, we have some images which we took during the stock count, where the expiration date is present. But as you can see, we can only match the item name to the subledger, as it is very unlikely that the item code is also listed in the inventory item. And if you scroll up a bit, you can see an expiration date there. The same goes for the others. Here we can see the item name and also the expiration date. So if you take a look at the test work, you can see that as an output, we will need the item name and the expiration date. Now, of course, we have the option to go through all these items manually and create manual text snips over the item name and the expiration date. But there is a slightly faster way to do that, because if you need to do it manually, first you need to select an item, scroll down a bit. You can see that it belongs to Nabisco. Now we need to search for the row where Nabisco is present. You can see that it is here. Now we need to go to the right, create a text snip over the item name, and also create a text snip over the expiration date. And that is only one item that we tested. We should do it for the rest of the items as well. But if you want to make that process a little bit faster, you can use document matching. As I'm sure that you already know, we can match the item name with the pictures. So DataSnipper is able to recognize handwritten text as well. So not just numbers as we experienced with the stock count PDF, but also texts. So let's see how we can match the item name with the pictures. So we need document matching. But since we've done a document matching already within that Excel workbook, we need to do it slightly differently. So if we want to edit document matching, we need to click on the Edit button right next to the first step, which is the Select Your Sample Data. And then we have the option to override the existing configuration of document matching. So let's click on the blue Edit button here on the top right corner. And once you click on that, you can see that we will be taken to the first step of document matching, which is the selection of our sample data. Now, in order to select our sample data, in that case, we only need the item name. So let's select only the item name. And again, the first row includes headers. Let's click on Next. And again, we need to use document folders since DataSnipper is not able to tell the difference between the types of supporting documents. So let's click on the blue Add New Folder button again. And we will be taken to the document organizer. Now here we have the new folder, and I'm sure that all of you know how to rename it, but I will show you one more time. We need to click on the three dots, and we need to click on Rename. Now the folder name will be expiration date. And now we can click back to the Show All Documents. We can select all, then deselect the stock count PDF as we don't need that in our expiration date folder. And now move these documents to the expiration date folder by clicking on the Move button here and by clicking on the expiration date. After the grouping is completed, now we can click on OK to close the document organizer, and we can select the expiration date folder here. Once it is selected, we can click on Next, and we can finalize document matching. The configuration will be quite easy as we only have one input data, and you can see that column J is the output column for the item name, so the configuration is correct. Now all we need to do is click on Match All Rows. And you can see the results for most of the items. Only one cell is left empty. Now, now it can happen that because of the handwritten text, DataSnipper is not able to read those texts correctly. So a few letters can be different. Now, in that case, we can apply a threshold on texts as well. We can do that by clicking on the three dots right next to the input attribute. And here we have several advanced options. We can set a threshold for amounts, but since we don't have an amount column, we don't need a threshold for amounts. We can set a field as mandatory, which means that if we have multiple input attributes, if we set one as mandatory, and if DataSnipper is not able to find an exact match for that attribute, it won't search for the other attributes. And lastly, we have fuzzy text matching. Fuzzy text matching is basically a threshold, but for texts. So for example, if only one or two letters are different from our selection and our supporting data, then with fuzzy text matching turned on, we can still get results. So let's turn on fuzzy text matching for the item name and click on Match All Rows again to see if the results are different. And now you can see that on the first row, we got some result, which is not correct. But since we have the cross-reference, we can easily just validate it based on our professional judgment. We can see that the first row should be MacVities, but now only Mac is extracted. But we can easily change the size of that text snip. And once we've done that, you can see that the cell content is also changed in the Excel workbook. So now what we need to do is to extract the expiration date from these images. And now, since we matched the item name to the supporting documents, it is very easy to search for the expiration date. As if we click on these cells, the document viewer will show us the supporting document as well. So we can just click on text snip and snip the relevant expiration date. So in case of McVitie's, we can just select the expiration date. Let's do the same for Merita Breads. Same for Mother's Pride. And let's do the same for the rest. And the reason that I use the document matching for the item name is to create these cross-references, because as you can see that even only with one cross-reference, it becomes very easy to extract other information. So in that case, I couldn't extract with a text snip that expiration date, but still I can click on the date itself. You can see that the search bar is populated, and by hovering my mouse over that result, I can click on the blue snip button, and the date is now extracted. And we only need to edit it a little bit by deleting the spaces and making it a date format. But now let's continue our extractions with Tasty Cake, with Thomas, and lastly with Jiffy Mix. So that is what happens when DataSnipper is not able to read the text over the supporting documents. In that case, by creating a text snip, it will highlight the part of the document where you see that text, but you need to set the text value manually, which in our case is that one. And once that is created, let's make it a date format. And now all the extractions are completed for our expiration date test. And we can see a formula here in the end to see if there is any difference between the subledger data and the expiration date from the supporting documents. Now, before progressing into our last use case, which is a price test procedure, I will pause for a moment to see if there are any questions. If something is not clear, please post them in the Q&A section of Zoom. If there are no questions, I would like to mention just one thing about these two use cases. So the reason that the training materials are not perfect is to show you how to troubleshoot these things when you are experiencing that on your own. So for example, in our previous test, we saw how to hide the information from DataSnipper. And in our current test, I wanted to show how you can combine document matching and manual snip in an effective way. Because it can happen that you can't find enough reference points for document matching. In that case, you can still use document matching for one or two attributes and manually snip the remaining ones, because at least you have cross-reference for one attribute, and you can easily extract the remaining information using a manual text snip. Now, since there are no questions at this point, let's progress to the next use case, which will be a price test. You can find the price test within the training materials. It is an other Excel file. So let's open that price test example. And once we open that and enable editing, you can see that the document viewer on the right-hand side popped up. And if you click on the drop-down menu, you can see that there are several invoices imported into DataSnipper. But before we take a closer look at these invoices, let's take a look at the summary sheet. you can see that our objective is to obtain reasonable assurance over the valuation of inventory. And our procedure is that first we will obtain the subledger and select a sample of goods. For that selection, we will obtain the latest purchase invoice for these items. And lastly, we will reconcile the unit price to the subledger data and ensure that the valuation of the goods is correct based on the predefined tolerance limit. So with the price test procedure, we are comparing the unit price to the unit price on the invoices, and we have a predefined tolerance limit, which means that we are comparing to the market value these inventory items, and if the unit price differs by more than 5% or any tolerance which is allowed according to your company's policy, then we will check if an inventory reserve is calculated on those items. So now if we progress to the second sheet, you can see that our selection here. So we have the item code, the item name, and the unit price. And we can, since I know you already know that, but since we have several unique input data, we can use document matching in that case. And as an output, you can see that we need the inventory item and the unit price. Now, since we already have invoices imported, we don't need to deal with the import documents. We can directly go to the DataSnipper button and to document matching. So by going to document matching, we can start a new document matching by clicking on the blue button here. And first we need to select our sample data, which will be the item code and the unit price. But let's take a look at the items. So first we need to take a look at the invoices as well, as now we selected the item code for document matching. But with that item code, we wouldn't get accurate results. Document matching would only be able to match the unit prices, as if you take a closer look at these invoices, you can see that only the item name is visible here. And the reason for that is that the item code is unique for our clients. It only exists in our client's accounting system. But when they purchase that inventory item, they will refer to it with the item name on the invoice. So since on the invoices only the item name is listed, we need to use that as an input data. So let's go back to document matching and edit our configuration a bit. So now that we know we need the item name from the invoices, we can select these two columns. And again, the first row includes headers. So we can continue the configuration. Secondly, we need to select our documents. But since we only have one test in our Excel workbook and we only trace back that input data to the invoices, we don't need to create document folders, as we only have one type of supporting documents imported. So we don't need to tell DataSnipper what kind of supporting documents are needed, because we need all of them. So we can select all documents. And finally, we need to finalize our document match. Now, as you can see, the column names are correctly configured, so we don't need to deal with that. But the unit price will be different, as we only see an average here, or any unit price according to our client's accounting system. And we also have a tolerance limit, so we are not looking for exact matches. We are looking for unit prices that are within the tolerance limit that we said before, which is 5%. Now, if we want to set a threshold for percentage, we have the option to do that. We just need to click on the three dots right next to the unit price attribute. and we need to click on the amount under the threshold text. Once we click on that, you can see that we can set two types of thresholds. First is a value threshold, where we can tell the DataSnipper if our predefined threshold is 1, for example, if we want to eliminate rounding errors. And we can also set a percentage as a threshold. This is especially useful for price testing, as in most times for price tests, a percentage is defined as a threshold, and the value should be 5 as it is listed in our workbook. Now that this 5% threshold is set, you can see that the column name is turned to blue, and if I hover my mouse over the information button, you can see that the threshold is now set for 5%. So now instead of looking for exact matches, DataSnipper is looking for a range of these unit prices, which is within that minus or plus 5%. So now that the configuration is completed, we can click on Match All Rows. And within a matter of seconds, you can see that DataSnipper did the hard work and matched the information, matched the input data to the supporting documents. And now all we need to do is to validate these results based on our professional judgment. You can see that there is a calculation in the following two columns. And also in the end, there is a check if it's within the allowed tolerance limit. But now again, there are some cells which are left empty. And in that case, it means that DataSnipper was not able to find a match, which is within the 5% tolerance limit that we allowed for document matching. So let's see what is the difference in those cases. So if I go to the nature's own cell, it will take me to the supporting document where the unit price is present. And you can see the unit price there. So let's create a manual text snip over that unit price. And the calculation next to it will check if it is correct or not. By using these two formulas, we don't need to mark it as an exception because it is highlighted in the last column with a no. So it is very easy for the reviewers as well to see if it's correct or not. Let's do the same for Roman meal. So create a manual text snip over the unit price. And once it is completed, you can see that the difference is higher than the preset 5% threshold. Now we found two exceptions, so we can go back to our client to ask for clarification or check the inventory reserve calculation for these two items if they are included in the calculation or not. So I will pause for a moment to see if there are any questions. But if there are no questions, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. You can see that someone raised their hand. Unfortunately, I can't unmute you, but you can post your question in the Q&A section. So again, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I will launch another poll, which will be a feedback poll. It takes a few seconds to fill it out, but we are always looking for ways to improve our training materials and also our trainings. So your feedback is very valuable to us. So I would highly appreciate it if you could fill it out. Also, I will stay in this webinar for a few more minutes. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. And for the others, happy snipping.